college sport, but I did do sports in high school, and that was way back when, because I'm in my late 50s now and everything. But that's actually kind of the role that I felt that I had and everything, was because I was not a good track runner. I ran the 880 and the mile. I thought that I was going to be a marathon runner or a long distance runner, and I'm getting ready to bring Kala in very shortly to talk about some of the things that she's done and all of that. But I was not good whatsoever in the field. So, but I was a good recruiter. Still, I'm a good recruiter. Still, I'm a good networker. So I recruited the team that we put on the field, and we won 3 out of 4 years of my running. Because, like I said, I ran 10th, 11th, and 12th, and we were allowed, because it was a 3-year high school, but we were allowed in our senior year of our junior high to be part of the track team as well. So I ran and did good, even though I didn't like do good in the race, but I did good in terms of recruiting. We won a number of races, and I hate to say it, John, but I think that the reason we lost it my senior year was because I got tired of losing. So I recruited somebody that I knew I could beat, and that might have cost us the victory and everything, because I think we lost by like a point or two, and we didn't really have anybody that could do the pole vault or a number of the other kinds of events like that. So I just got tired of losing and was a little bit on the selfish side. And I know that's not something that coaches want to hear, but that's actually what I did. And like I said, it might have cost us my senior year and all of that. But I know that that's just kind of like my story of being involved in that and everything. And I also know another story that I share, and like I said, I'm going to bring Kala in as well. But another story that I like to share is that when I was at a summer journalism camp, studying this great field of journalism and everything, I was challenged in a race. And of course, if you're a high school kid, you've got a little bit of that bravado and all of that. So I was like, sure, I can win. I'm going to beat this guy. And I knew that there was probably no chance of me beating him whatsoever. So I took up the challenge and accepted his gauntlet that he threw down at me and all of that. And then I talked myself out of going to the race, because I was like, I know I'm going to get smoked in this race, so there's no need for me to go to the race. It kind of comes down to your story about your parents and everything. So I was like, there's no way I'm going to make this race. I know I'm going to lose, and it's going to be embarrassing. My people that are here in this camp with me are going to see me lose. They're going to be embarrassed. So I talked myself out of going, and I think I waited till way in the evening time, like maybe 5 or 6. And as I was going down there, I saw my friends coming back, and I was like, we'll just say a name. Did Jack make it to the race? And, what kind of excuse did y'all give for me and everything? And they were like, Jack didn't show up either. So I just myself into thinking that I was going to get beat by this guy. He probably was selling wolf tickets as well, and apparently he didn't show up also. So when they were sitting there just staring at a track and all of that. But definitely, Kala, I'm glad that you were able to join us, and I know that you are a coach as well. You've done work in the triathlon field, and I would love to hear about this work that you've done in the triathlon field. That's not a race that I would probably even dare to do, even though my brother has tried some of those endurance races and all of that. But he's didn't have much luck either, because he got injured, I think, the 2 or 3 times he tried it. So the family basically was like, no, Malik, that's my brother's name. You just need to give up on those kind of races, because I think the 2 times he tried those endurance races, he broke something. So I think my parents were like, no, we need to find you something else for a hobby. But triathletes, I have a great deal of admiration for them. So if you can share a little bit about your background, and then I definitely want to continue this whole conversation around coaching and what we think are great ideals of coaching.
Awesome. Well, first, Mark, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. And John, it's really great to meet you. What a great resource for me to. I took furious notes while you were talking as I was backstage. So to be amongst such excellent people is really an honor. So Mark, you got it right. I am a coach, a triathlon coach, but I became a coach because I fell in love with triathlon. And I wanted to make sure that other people who looked like me were at the start lines of races. And I figured that the only way that I would be able to do that was to be the coach that welcomed and accepted them into the triathlon world, and then showed them how to get to that start line. So you guys were talking about all these sports teams, and I'm like, I don't know any of them. I know a little bit. I mean, you can't not know about the Gonzaga game, right? And like the thing at the end of the game, like that was whatever. I've been an athlete almost my entire life, and I've always been coached in one way or another. So, John, I'm right with you. The value of coaching, I think, is just undescribable, and that was part of the reason why I became a coach, because I know the value myself, how coaching sort of helped me become a better athlete and a better human and all that stuff. So I swam all in high school, and I always hated running. So I was, Mark, you're a runner. You've got the hardest part done. We just got to get you in the pool and put you on a bike and have you do some strength and some balance training so you don't get hurt like your brother did. Like you've got it down. You've got it down. Yeah, so I came to triathlon because I had started running, even though I didn't like it. And I wanted to become a better runner. And so you cross train to do that. And so I got back in the pool, remembered how to swim. I got myself a bike. I started cycling around. I thought I should do races. So I sort of got into the swimming race side of things. And then I started looking at cycling races. And everyone's like, well, what kind of cycling? Because if it's, velodrome, if it's road, if it's crypt, if it's triathlon, I was like, triathlon? What's that now? And that was just sort of the end of everything. Like it's putting three things together, doing an incredible challenge, feeling super strong right when you finish, like having the commitment to your training. And then, of course, there's just a whole community out there of all of us that are just silly enough to want to do something like this. So you can't help but fall in love with it. And I'm sure your brother would agree, even though he kept getting hurt, he probably made some lifelong friends in that community. So yeah, so it's a really long roundabout way of saying I love it, and that's why I became a coach.
Yeah, he definitely still loves it. And like you said, he made friends in that community, and he's now involved in another community because he's involved in the community of people that run those. I call them the Batmobile cars, but they're like those Polaris cars and all of that. So during this whole time of COVID and everything, his group of car enthusiasts, they actually went out and like his girlfriend's daughter was graduating last year, so they actually went and did like a graduation drive-by since she was not able to have the traditional graduation ceremony and all of that, and she just loved it. And they were finding other ways to get involved in community. That's one of the things that I've noticed about coaches, as well as even the triathlete community and even the bicycling community, is that it does seem to be very much about community. So I was wondering if both of you could talk about that aspect, because it definitely seems to me that within sports altogether, it's very much about community and enhancing our community skills and all of that. Because I don't know anybody that's involved in any form of exercise, whether it's bicycling or whether it's running or a number of others that don't have that community aspect. But I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Well, I think the community that's developed with the team is so powerful. Okay, and even Kyler, as you're saying, the community that you develop, with your triathletes, and then that community that kind of goes there is where people have some level of a shared identity or common ground for the things that they do. And that basically what they can then do is they can kind of thread off there, branch out of there, and spread the things that matter most to them to other people. And that's where we can get groundswells of that. And so often we see with athletic teams is that we get communities that come around athletic teams, and everybody wants to be on a team. And if, we look at politics, people want to be on one of those teams, or maybe as a libertarian, a third team. Okay, whether they believe the ideology or not, they want to be there. But when you really believe in the philosophy, believe in the ideology, that's really important to have. And that can spread itself through different communities. And I've seen this a lot where a lot of athletic teams will go out and perform community service, not as just something extra to do or some sort of promotional thing to help to defray costs of the team, but literally go out because it's the right thing to do. And we're here to help you. We're here to serve you. And that's truly how you bring servant leadership into sports.
Yeah, true.
No, I definitely agree with you.
Absolutely.
And I think I saw that with quite a few of the athletes that were using their platform in order to talk about issues that they were concerned about. I think we saw that with a number of the professional athletes when they were talking about
Mhm.
things around Black Lives Matter. And I think we've
Mhm.
even seen it now when people are using their platforms to address issues that are going on with our Asian American brothers and sisters, as well as other folks that are being discriminated against. But they're using the platform that they have, which is that team platform or that athletic platform. But one of the things I was curious about, Kyla, with your situation and everything is, do you feel that, this is, we're in the middle, hopefully everybody's getting their vaccine. I know I still got to get mine and all of that, but we're going to hopefully cross the, divide that we've been having, but a lot of people have not felt that they've been able to do as much training or as much as they would like to do because of the fact that we're all at home working from our computers and doing things of that nature. So how were you able, or how are you able to even maintain your training when we're in the middle of this pandemic?
Absolutely. Mark, that's such a great question. And I just wanted to like tag on to what John was saying. Everyone wants to be part of something because we're stronger together than we are separately. Like we're stronger, we're more than we are the sum of our parts. And so everyone wants to be part of something, right? We're all looking for that. And I think that's why teams form. I think that's why we get fantastic fun rivalries between football and baseball teams. Like it just we all want to be part of something that we put our heart into. And that's what made this past season, I think, in any sport, just heartbreaking, right? We have like this was my year. 2020 was my year to qualify to go to a world championship in 2021. Everything got canceled. Race after race after race. Races are so much more than just events to go and put it all out on the line. Races are when the community that the triathlon world has built get to come together and party. So there's a very special community out there of triathletes. We're called Athenas. We're a weight class, but I hate that description. So we're the bigger women, and we get to race against each other. And we are such a tight knit community, and we have people all over the world. And the time that we come together is at races, and race after race after race is canceled. And just you think by the fifth time it's not going to hurt as much. No, like every single time. And then the world championships got pushed, like everything just, whoo. I have never seen a community stick so tight together than I've seen the triathlete community, but also my team, just to brag on them. Like they just, because there was a shared sadness, a shared grief over just everything being gone. And it was tough. And it made every single one of us examine why it is we race. Do we race because it's fun? Do we race because that's the motivation? Do we not care about racing? We care more about training and working out because it keeps us sane. We all went through as a community. There isn't a single triathlete that did not go through figuring out why they do what they do. And I think that's something that John touched on really early on. You have to know why.
Right.
You got to know why you're doing it. And I had athletes join my team because we were strong, and I was writing training plans and coaching and doing all of this, figuring out how to get people to maintain their swim fitness when they can't go to the pool, right? You got to think outside the box for that. How do you have, we saw a lot of virtual races pop up. Everyone's done with virtual races now. We don't ever want to see another one again, but they were fun when they started. I think that when the community is already there, the people who are really there for the community are going to stick around no matter what. The people who are there just because it was trendy or fun or convenient, they're the ones who sort of faded away, and they'll probably come back when races come back. And there are I live down in Florida, so whatever you want to think about, whatever, we kind of never really shut down. So we only had like 3 months where we weren't really racing. Everything's pretty small still, but there is a full calendar of races almost everywhere. And there's a whole set of COVID protocols and everything that race directors are following and all this other stuff. So we're all starting to see this glimmer at the end of the tunnel, like you were saying. And there's, again, we're just like, how are we all going to do this? What races are we going to show up at? What directors are we going to support? Where are we putting our money as a community to keep races alive? And when we talk about the servant leadership, you see race directors who are saying, we're donating all our money to this particular Black Lives Matter movement, or this. One of the things that has started getting a lot of recognition is teaching young Black kids how to swim. Right. Because there's just so much that needs to be done in that area. So we pick races that are choosing to do good things, and we do that as a community, and there's a lot of power in that. So doing things because they're right, not because we have to. We're seeing that more and more and more. So yes, it's been very tough. Yes, it's been a wonderful learning experience, and now, like, on a very personal level, now 2021 is my year and I get another chance to do it. And they pushed all the world championships. So the one that I still want is just next year instead. It's really lovely. So there's a lot of hope and enthusiasm and joy about that light at the end of the tunnel. So yeah.
Now, in the triathlete world, I know that in the other sports, we were just talking about basketball, they went into that whole bubble mentality and everything. So they did it kind of like in that bubble situation where everybody was protected and all of that. And I think that the NBA for the second year in a row will probably do that in the championship. I know that that's definitely what they did in college ball and definitely have done in a number of other ways also. But is that what we're going to see in the race world as well? Because I'm thinking that throughout society, we're seeing more and more what I call hybrid events. Like, I'm involved in the film world and have been part of film festivals, as well as serve on the board of one of our local theaters. And I know that right now, our film festivals have been virtual, but they are talking that by the end of the year, we may be able to go into more of that hybrid environment. So I was just wondering, as both of you are involved in the sports world, do you think that that's going to be the new trend in sports, that we're going to be pushing toward hybrid events? Or do you actually think that we will be able to get a full audience of people possibly wearing masks, possibly not wearing masks in these different venues and all? But what is your thoughts about which direction entertainment, and particularly sports entertainment, is going? Is that the way we're heading, is hybrid competitions?
So it's really interesting that you asked that question. Almost, so there's kind of two levels in triathlon, right? There's like the fun people who race. We tend to be a little competitive, but we're not professionals. Those races these days, almost everyone has a virtual option. So you can register for the race and you do the race at home, right? They have to keep the numbers low because of how much distance we have to keep in the transition area, like all this stuff. Temperature checks, masks required all the way up to the start line. They hand out masks at the finish line. As much contactless like stuff as possible. Your medal is in your packet pickup, like all that stuff, right? Then we have the professional level, right? And here in the US, we've had 3 professional triathlete races since quarantine sort of lifted. There's Challenge Daytona in December, which I had the joy of going to and being a referee. That was incredible. We had Great Floridian, that was in October. I also got to go to that one and referee. And then we just had Challenge Miami, which I did not go to. And we talk about sort of making a bubble. These are athletes that come from all over the world, right? We had Paula Finlay, who comes from Canada. In Challenge Daytona, we had Alistair Brownlee, who came from the UK. We've got a bunch of UK or US athletes here as well. So they create like a little bubble, and like they have to have a COVID negative test. They have to do a couple of them. They have temperature checks all the time. And then someone actually tested positive before, I think it was before Challenge Miami, and someone else was trying to come in and they hadn't filed their paperwork to come in from, I think, Hawaii. So they weren't allowed to come and race. So on a professional level, they really are trying to go above and beyond because it's so much more of an international kind of thing going on. But there is definitely 2 different levels. So you can't really have a hybrid at the pro level. But there's definitely a lot of checks and balances going on in there. When she tested positive, they already had a quarantine hotel set up for her, like a whole process. It was really, really well handled. I mean, it was really sad that she didn't get to race, but it was really well handled as far as that goes. Triathlon does not have the money pouring into it like baseball and basketball and cricket and all those other things. So, they do the best they can with what they have. One of the really big things was at Challenge Daytona, there was a $1.2 million purse of money that was on the line because the pros hadn't raced almost all year. They hadn't made any money. So there was a lot of money on the line at that race. And a lot of people are like, I'm like, they haven't raced all year. This is like their one paycheck. So it was very enticing for a lot of pros to come in, but they still very much limited. And there were crowds there. it was at like 10% of what it normally is. And it was like mass everywhere, all the stuff. So even at the events, which would, be like going to games and stuff, there was just a lot of safety and a lot of protocols going on. The thing that's come out of it, and maybe both of you know this with sports, is so much live streaming now. Like, you don't live where your team is and there's no blackout stuff of dates or whatever. Now you can just watch any game anywhere pretty much. Everything is live stream. And so that has made the triathlon professional circuit, I think, a lot more accessible. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that coming in, because if you go watch a professional triathlon race, just go watch one. Go watch the highlights from Challenge Miami. You'll be hooked. It's so exciting. I mean, it's so exciting. They're going 25 to 30 miles an hour on their bicycles. They're running 6-minute miles. It is fast paced. It is incredible. And I'm very, very excited about it. And I will talk about triathlon all day. John, please interrupt me. And
No problem. No problem. You were doing a great job. I was enjoying the conversation. I do have a question that I'm curious about, because one of the things that I know that was very popular was kind of these contests that are, I mentioned like those endurance races where you're doing like what do you call them? Obstacle courses. That's kind of what my brother was involved in and all of that. But then there are also the ones that I sometimes wonder how triathletes and other runners feel about these contests, because to me, they don't really make much sense. Like, I know here in North Carolina, we've got something called the Krispy Kreme Challenge, where a lot of folks will run these great races and everything else, but then they're also supposed to eat a lot of Krispy Kreme's donuts and all of that. So it seems to me that that's kind of defeating the purpose. But then you have the other great races like the Great American Race that are there to honor the different causes. Like, it might be a race for breast cancer awareness, or a race for diabetes, or a race for a number of other things along those lines. So I'm just wondering your thoughts about those specialty races. That's what I call them, is specialty races. And sometimes the specialty races, like, I don't know how you can go running like 10, 15 miles or however many miles they run and then go eat tons of donuts, but they do it.
There is a race for anything that you want to do. And now it makes more sense that your brother kept getting injured, because those Spartan races, I tried one. No, it was not for me. The donut race thing seems to be a really, really big theme. They have donut cycling races, donut running races. People do them for fun, right? We do them for fun. I did a 66-mile bike ride race where for every donut you ate, you got 5 minutes off your time. It took me 8 minutes to eat a donut. They were huge. They were these huge donuts. It took me 8 minutes to stop, get off my bike, get a donut, eat it, and I was not saving time. And you're right. Like, people train. Just like people train to be professional eaters, right? People train to run and eat donuts, run and drink beer, run and do other things, run and swim and run and swim and run and swim. It takes a special kind of person to eat 10 donuts and run 10 miles, but people do it. And people love theme races. They love specialty races. They love the races that donate money to stuff. There's a lot of ones that honor veterans and the military. There's a great one in Indiana called Leon's Triathlon that is really aimed specifically at military and veterans, and they do a lot of fundraising for that. So if you've got a cause, if you've got something you love, there's going to be a race for it. And if you got something that you like doing, like rollerblading, there's going to be a race for that. You just got to find it. Your people are out there. Your team is waiting for you.
Definitely. What do you think is some of the big mistakes? I was talking, and I'd love to hear from both of you, but I'll start with you, Kyla, that people make when they are doing coaching? Because you've coached triathletes, you've coached a number of other folks, but what I mentioned some of the great coaches that I know about here in this area. North Carolina is definitely a basketball center and all of that, but I've also followed football. I remember that I was and still am a big fan of the Minnesota Vikings, so I have a great deal of respect for the legendary coach Bud Grant and a number of other coaches in the football fraternity, including the gentleman from New England. But I was just wondering, what are some of the mistakes that you feel folks make when they are getting involved in coaching that you wish they would not do?
Mm. I think the absolute number one mistake you can make as a coach is to not listen to your athlete. I've had a number of people join my team because I am authentic and transparent about my struggles as an athlete with mental issues, anxiety, depression, all that stuff, with injury, with all that stuff. I am transparent and people see that. So they know they can come to me if they're trying to train through anxiety. I had a person come and join my team who was paying their coach a ridiculous amount of money a month. And all their coach did was make them feel terrible when they had to skip a workout because the anxiety was just too much. When you start putting your own whatever on your athletes, it is a fine line. I think John will agree with me. It's a fine line that you tread between pushing them and pushing them away. But if you really listen, if you understand what their priorities are and you honor those priorities, your athletes are going to love you, regardless of whether or not you're good at writing plans or good at doing whatever. You're listening and honoring where they come from. And that's the number one mistake I see over and over and over again. Not listening.
I totally agree with you, Kyla, regarding that. It's listening to your athletes and that the coach is not the main actor in the story.
Yes.
That's, and sometimes the media can play that up, but basically they are a supporting cast to support the athletes in the things that they're doing. There's a really interesting thing out there in the Barry Oshry wrote a book called The Secret Mysteries of Organizational Life. And basically he talks about the notion of that in all organizations, and I'll talk about sports right here, we have tops, middles, and bottoms in the stratosphere of power differentials on teams. And if the coach the coach is typically the top of the food chain right there. And then the team captains and seniors and other team leaders are kind of the middles. And then the rest of the team are the bottoms. And bottoms does not mean that they're bottom feeders at all. No. But sometimes coaches treat them as that. But the bottom line is coaches understand that basically the work gets done by the bottoms. And that then when athletes are out there competing, whether in more of an individual or a team sport, okay, they know more about what's going on than anybody does. And if coach listens to them, as Kyla was saying, to bring that up, that's important. Going back to Catherine DiLorenzo at Middlebury College, she really welcomes her athletes. If they call a timeout, they come by, something's not working. She invites and she says to the players, well, what are you seeing out there? And one of the players may say, coach, when we did this against this other team with that same type of structure, it tended to work for us. Thank you. Thank you, Gina. That was perfect. Let's do that as we go back out there. But that the athlete matters, the coach listens to the athlete. And that's when the top, middle, bottom relationship is empowered, when that coach listens to and brings to fore all the things that are going on and that what the athletes have to say. Because if it's not working, if it's not working out there, basically the athletes bond together and they live in a world of like, we're not listened to. Okay. The top does, whatever they want to do. And we can see this in business organizations also. And one other thing in there too is there's the notion of of, besides listening, it's providing appropriate feedback, giving the right feedback at the right time
Yes.
for the right reason.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
there's maybe like three types of feedback. Doug Stone and Sheila Heen wrote a great book called Thanks for the Feedback. And basically, appreciative feedback, we know what that is. It's saying, hey, that's a great job. But you go beyond that's a great job. You say, what was it about what they did that you so enjoyed? To let them know that, to feed that back to them. Then there's coaching or skill improvement feedback saying, hey, I'm going to coach you up. Then there's evaluative feedback saying, okay, this is how well you did. This is how well you didn't do. And so sometimes athletes don't care for the evaluative feedback. And the thing is that coaches need to know, is this the right time to give that feedback? Or maybe I should give coaching feedback instead. Or if you're always going around giving appreciative feedback, everything's great. And the athlete finally says, coach, you got to coach me some more with this. So it's finding that sweet spot. Now, does that put more of an onus and responsibility on the coach? Yeah, it does. It does. But the bottom line, the rewards are so much greater because you get to know your athletes more, and your athletes really respond to that.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like you're both saying, and I'd love to hear if I'm hearing you correctly, that the coach, doesn't matter whether it's a business coach or a athletic coach or any kind of coach that exists out there. I've even got some friends that are health coaches, but they're not just doing the coaching of whatever that field is, but it also sounds like they're also life coaches, because it seems to me that the best coaches that I know are the ones that they're not just friends with that particular person doing that 3 or 4 years that they are with that person, assuming that they stay for the duration of their college career and all of that, but they are staying friends with them throughout. Because I've heard of a number of even like NBA players that are still in touch with their high school or their college coaches because they had that connection with them as being a life coach, and they were giving them advice about life things, whether that's relationship things that they might have been getting into, or finances, because a lot of times they are, coming up with, if they become like an NBA and an NFL player, a major star that gets major money. So then they don't always know how to handle that money. But it seems to me that the best coaches are those that are the coaches, not just for that moment, but they are there to be coaches throughout. And they build this bond with their athletes that carries them throughout their coaching career. Every time I hear of coaches that are being talked about, like say on ESPN or some of the other sports programming and sports networks, they oftentimes are talking to athletes that are reflecting on the coaches in their life that they might have had in the past and how they are hoping to maintain the relationship with the coach that they currently have. So how important do you think it is for coaches to be life coaches?
That's such a great question. I've had so many athletes tell me, Kyla, you're so much more of a life coach than a triathlon coach. And I'm like, well, I'm just coaching you about your life. It just happens that right now your life is about triathlon or your life is about this. I think it just goes back to listening, right? Like, not unless you're a professional athlete, your life is not about whatever sport you're doing, right? So my athletes have jobs and families and kids and parents and cars and houses and things they have to deal with that might be more important than getting to the pool, right? And helping, showing, supporting people how to balance all of the things that are going on and figure out what is really most important right now and who are you putting first. That's just a key element in being a good coach, because you're not always going to be first to your athletes, and that can be, an ego, whatever, not for me. But if you help those athletes understand that they should always be first to themselves, because a lot of them they don't think that. They think that their kids are first or their job is first. Once they decide to put themselves first, then it makes it a lot easier to think about that 8-hour training day where they're going to be away from everything. Like, it's all right to say, I need this time for myself. So, a good coach is a good coach. It's more than just writing a training plan. It's more than just giving someone a business model to follow for their business. It's more than knowing how to run the right kind of drills for softball. It's about helping our athletes balance everything in their life, including the sport.
And I'd love to hear from both of you your thoughts, and you actually alluded to it, Kyla, about the importance of sports and just sports training and just life in general to psychology. Because I think that's one of the things we talk about here on the International Broadcast Media is the fact that too often we don't spend enough time paying attention to people's personal psychology and what they're going through and everything. John, you had actually alluded to, and that is actually was one of the moments that touched me as well, seeing that coach actually reach over and talk to their star athlete and, basically letting them know that, this was not the end of the world, that even though I believe that that athlete was a senior, but that they would probably go on to do many other great things. And even though they missed that shot, that it was not going to be the, definitely they were going to feel the pain of losing and the pain of what they went through, but it wasn't going to be like a overly devastating impact on their overall life. And that's the kind of impression that I got is what she was doing in that comforting moment. And it definitely touched me and everything. And I saw even that some of the combatants were doing the same thing. I mean, I think I saw one of the other nice moments that I saw in the competition between Gonzaga and UCLA was how the players actually got together and kind of huddled together, even though they were on opposite teams. And even though one won and the other lost, they were acknowledging each other's presence and what they had just gone through. Because I kind of agree with what Clark Kellogg said, that, there was no real loser in that game. There was just one team that ran out of time because they were definitely going to battle. And it's just a matter of one had to move on and the other had to go and collect their thoughts and, prepare for the next year or the next season or the next phase of their life if they're a senior and about to graduate. But I was just wondering some of your thoughts about the role of psychology in coaching and the role of understanding psychology.
Yeah.
Well, I see coaches as mentors and the athlete as a mentee, but there's a reciprocal relationship right there. And Kyla, you've probably seen this too, is where we gather so much from what goes on with the athlete. There's a thing called the hot, cold empathy gap. And the thing is that many times coaches who are athletes themselves, and they communicate with the athlete, but the athlete's in a different space at this time than the coach is. But when the coach can actually feel and know and understand what it's like to be an athlete today. What was it like for a year not being able to compete? As Kyla's saying, not being able to be in a triathlon competition. And I've worked with a variety of different athletes and teams over the past year where the teams have met, and I've met with them on Zoom, and there's so much you can get out of social media with that. Okay. But the bottom line is to psychology is that we all want to be listened to. As Kyla was saying, we want to feel genuinely needed. Okay. And we want to have some sort of meaningful purpose in life. And when coaches can be able to address that and help to bring that out with their athletes, that's doing the real psychology of it. And, sometimes people will use little, standard cliches about different sports stuff. It goes so much deeper than that. And this is where coaches, the more that they can learn and how they can bring out the best and that they can be lifelong learners, will actually bring out the best in their athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. So John, I love that you sort of came in from like a sports psychology perspective as well, which is like really great because I want to attack it from like the mental health side of the psychology,
certainly.
Right?
Yeah.
So mental health, huge stigma in this world. And I remember the very first time I did a social media post and I talked about how some days I don't get out of bed because the depression wins, or some days I don't do XYZ because the anxiety wins. And I talk about the support structure that I've created for myself. So when I have those rough days, I know how to sort of pull myself back out of it and things like that. And so many people had said, thank you for being honest and open about this. And I ended up getting so many athletes who said, oh, good. Someone who's going to understand when I say I didn't go on that 6-mile run because I was in bed under the covers because it was a bad day, right? So being a coach who understands mental health, regardless of whether or not you've walked that path and have that struggle, but you understand at a just a basic psychology level what depression, what bipolar, what the autism spectrum is, what anxiety is like, what all of those things, so that you understand, even if it's just in a brain level, what your athletes might be going through. That goes right with that listening, right? Because you're going to know if someone tells you they couldn't do something because they had an anxiety attack, the worst thing you can do is make them feel guilty. The best thing you can do is say, okay, let's try again tomorrow or next week or whenever, right? Especially with this pandemic, we're seeing so many more people identify that they have struggled with some sort of mental illness, and the pandemic really just amplified it. And of course, a lot of people really did have a lot of depression and things that happened and triggered because of the isolation, but a fair amount of those people actually had a lifelong mental illness that they just never realized what normal looked like. So raising the awareness that it's okay to have those things. Hey, and guess what? You can be a phenomenal athlete and a phenomenal human being, just by having that basic understanding of what that's like for people who struggle with that. So yeah, that's where that is.
Just to dovetail on what Kyla was saying, is that even not at a total clinical position.
Thank you. That's the word, clinical.
Is that sometimes athletes, when they have fear and anxiety regarding their performance, or they have anger, or they have guilt, or they feel shame or sadness or disgust, that may not be all the way a clinical concern, but it's something that the emotions come out, but their belief system, is negative. And it usually is something that it's not just on the athletic field. It's in, as Kyla was saying, it's daily life.
Yeah.
So if an athlete feels is that they're not competent, or they feel fear and anxiety because of that, well, where else do you not feel confident and competent in your life? And usually it's something else that's going on too. And if coaches can be able to help the athlete go past the emotion and understand what's the thought that's going on there when you don't do well. Now, this is really important, and it's age. It needs to be age appropriate too. That the coach and the athlete have that vulnerability, trust with each other. Is that when if saying I let the team down. I didn't do it. I missed the last shot. I let the team down. Well, what's that all about? That you violated somebody else's rights. Now reject that thought.
Mm-hmm.
Did you really do that? Or it was just one play, one moment in time?
Yeah.
Not to define yourself as a just your behavior at that one moment. Yeah.
And how much do you think it is important for coaches to be involved? And I have a bias toward the example I'm going to use and everything. But a lot of times I think that coaches and athletes know that they're in a business relationship, and it's definitely a business relationship. I'm thinking about like the professional athlete and the professional coach and everything. But then, they don't always follow the same protocol as maybe they were expected to get into that business world. I'm actually went to school. We were at Marquette at the same time with Doc Rivers. And I know that he was recently in the news because one of his athletes that was involved in a trade was basically like, Doc could have at least gotten in touch with me and told me about the trade, wished me well, and all of that. And I think Doc's attitude was kind of like, I'm concentrating on trying to build the 76ers into a championship quality team. So no, I did not make that call and all of that. So that's kind of the gist of what I heard and everything. And like I said, I did go to school with Doc, so maybe I'm taking a little bit more of his side than the other guy's side. But I was just wondering, how important do you think it is to have that business relationship even in the corporate sports world?
This might be a John question.
It's a really good question. I don't know if I have a great answer for that because all coaches are different. I mean, what is the purpose of professional sports? And there's so many different other taglines that go around with that there too. I'm biased in going to the point is that even with business decisions, you still need to cultivate connections. You need to effectively challenge your athletes, and you need to give them some level of control and across the whole spectrum. So basically, if an athlete goes to a different team, which means they're leaving the company and they're going to a different company, many coaches will just say, they may have that exit interview. But if you're in the midst of your season and you've got a game the next day with the person that was traded for coming right back in, there may not be time to do that at that moment. Okay? Yeah. And not that the athletes need to have thick skin, but I'm biased to the point is you still want to try to kind of communicate a little bit. And this is what we've done. It's a business decision. It's not personal. But those are tough things when we get to the professional levels.
Right.
Yeah,
I think when you talk about the business relationship of I've hired a coach for me, right? Like my athletes pay me money, so I coach them. And if I don't coach them the way they want to be coached, that gets weird, right? So when we're talking about like a business relationship on that sense, like I have expectations from the coach that I have a very nice, famous swim coach that I pay a fair chunk of money to. So I have expectations about how he's going to coach me because I pay him a lot of money. And he is a professional. He coaches Olympians. So maybe I got to let myself take a back seat and let him coach the way he's best. There's a reason why I'm paying him a lot of money. There's a reason why he has Olympians that he coaches, right? So that kind of business relationship is also very interesting. Like I'm paying you money for a service. You better give me what I want. You might not like the way that I coach. You are free to go find another coach in that sense. So it does get a little, I've had it get a little weird, but fortunately with only one athlete. And I was like, look, there's other coaches and there's lots of other coaches. And if you don't like what you're getting from me, then that's fine. You can go find another company to work for, right? Like, so it's interesting on on a team level. And this is, Marc, you put together, John is an amazing person because it sounds like you have a lot of team coaching expertise. At the very least, you know a lot about sports teams and coaching. And I have a lot of individual coaching experience. So it's really like two different worlds. And I'm learning a ton from John. So like, thank you for putting together a great pair of people. But it's still that same dynamic, right? Of I'm paying you a lot of money to do something. And if you're not going to do what I want to do, then, we talk about like the Anaheim Mighty Ducks as a hockey team, right? Mm-hmm. They were a bonus add-on for Disney to make more money. That's how they started. No one ever expected that they'd win their league. No one ever expected they'd go to the Stanley Cup, like anything like that, because they were a Mickey Mouse team to make extra money for Disney, right? You got the LA Kings right next door, a serious, legit NHL team. I'm talking like 10 or 15 years ago. I'm probably dating myself, but maybe even oh my gosh, like 20 years ago. And then they became a great team because they didn't care. Those coaches didn't care what they were being paid for. They wanted to coach a winning team, and the athletes wanted to be winners. That's their job, right? So it's really interesting how even though the boss says one thing, all the other people, they can sort of take over and do what they want, if that makes sense. But if you don't know about the history of the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, go read it. It's a fascinating story. So it's like the one bit of sports I know is hockey.
So we actually had hockey down here, even in the Carolinas, and they actually did pretty well a couple of times, and we'll see what they do this time. But the Hurricanes
Who are the Stanley Cup champions? The Tampa Bay.
That's right, Tampa Bay.
Florida.
Yep, Tampa Bay.
Florida is the Stanley Cup champions. People are rolling Canada cannot take it. How? They're like, how do you even have ice? I'm like, look, science. That's how we have ice, right? Like, they're not even my team. I mean, Tampa Bay, they're a great team, but it's like, yeah, it's all over now. It's all over the place.
Yeah, it's all over the place, and I know that one of our producers here, he's hoping that he can get cricket to go all over the place. But I'm like, that's a long game. I don't know if that's ever going to happen because that game takes much too long. But I know that Anki, one of our producers, is always trying to get us to understand the wonders of cricket and how it's an amazing sport. And I'm not arguing with him on that, but it just seems like too long, and I don't know that it will ever catch on as an American sport. Is there any sport that you think will catch on that we haven't had catch on yet? Because I know some people were hoping that lacrosse would catch on, and of course there's that push for soccer, even though it hasn't quite caught on as much as some of the soccer folks would like. But is there a sport out there that you do think has a hope of being the new sport at some point or another? Either one of you.
Well, I'm kind of biased because I was a lacrosse goalie and I had coached lacrosse for many years. And now there were two professional lacrosse leagues, one called Major League Lacrosse, another called the Premier Lacrosse League. And basically they basically merged now. And now we just have the Premier Lacrosse League. And basically in that PLL, they don't have any home fields. They don't have a home team. They travel during the summertime with all 8, I believe, maybe 7 or 8 teams now. They'll travel from venue to venue, and they've got a great social media following, and they'll get that. And that's really been a very interesting way to kind of make the shift, from having your, people kind of being, nationalistic and having their own home teams there. You can have your team now, but you're going to see that, with they've got some rights with NBC and ESPN and et cetera, like that. So I see that as coming along there. I from that perspective, I think with lacrosse is really kind of making a strong charge now as the next sport.
Yeah.
I think there's 2 exciting things going on, right? One, breakdancing at the Olympics. Yes. So cool. Like elevating that to the level of sport. That's really cool to me. Yeah. The thing that I wish would become huge is artistic swimming, which they used to call synchronized swimming, but now they call it artistic swimming for whatever reason. The US has a phenomenal team. Oh my goodness, they're incredible. And you're starting to see all the other teams around the world. We're starting to devote resources to them and coaching and time and money and all this other stuff. I would really love to see that take off because the physicality, the mentalness, the team spirit, like it puts basketball to shame. It's everyone in motion and the same thing. And if you get off, you get kicked in the face. Like, ooh, artistic swimming. I would love to see that take off. It's just, and there's a lot of movements to start it in where there's already like swim teams with young swimmers, is to say, hey, come over here and try this, because they've already got some of the physicality. They've got some of the breath work that's going. And so if you get them when they're middle teens, early 20s, you can really start to develop that. I'd really love to see that take off. It would be so much fun to see.
Yeah, I can agree with that, but I'm also a big fan, and my cousin played it a couple of times, just recreationally. I don't think he played it competitively or anything along those lines, but I've been a big fan for a while of soccer, and I would love to see soccer take off and everything, but I don't know why soccer hasn't quite taken off, and even in like our big cities and all of that. So I'd love to hear.
Well, you talked about how cricket is a long game, right?
Yes.
Soccer is a long game, and it rarely ends when it's supposed to end. It can end whenever they want it to end. And I think that's why it really hasn't taken off. We'll be very clear, in the US. The rest of the world is crazy for soccer. I mean, they love it. They absolutely love it. But I think along with sort of the lines of cricket, I think that even though soccer is very fast moving, it's a longer game. And if you want to fall in love with soccer, go watch Ted Lasso, which is on Apple TV Plus. It's a phenomenal show. It's about British soccer, but it's still really great. You get to learn a little bit of how it works in Britain. But I think it's because it's a longer game. I think it's the rules are a little bit weird comparatively to the things that we know. And the whole idea that you never know when it's going to end. Like, just, I think that baffles our minds as Americans a little bit. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
can see that and everything. One of the things that I know that the network talks about all the time is this concept of education. And within education, they oftentimes talk about financial literacy and a number of other things that go on within our education system. But I know that one of their famous quotes is that we are in the 21st century, but we're going by 18th century values. I would argue the same thing with our sports programming, in the sense of like the way that we teach health and sports in the school system and all of that. But I was just wondering, do you feel that there's enough push for not so much the competitive side? Because I think that we're doing all right at every high school, every junior high, they've got their teams, they're competing and everything. But in the day-to-day teaching of health and of sports in general, because I remember going to school in the 70s, and definitely you were required to take certain health courses that might involve running and having that exercise time. I don't know, I don't have any kids of my own, but I don't know that my two nephews have that kind of exercise time, except for that they create themselves, and they do belong to outside clubs, but I don't know that they get enough of that in the school system. So do you think that we as a society, meaning American society, are doing a good enough job of encouraging sports and athleticism and definitely health within our school system?
Well, I think in some ways, with academic competencies being so strong, it is kind of in some ways left some of the health education pieces out.
Right.
You know, but if a school system, if school districts really say that they educate the whole child or the whole person, then you have to look at that whole person. And I look from a standpoint of looking at, you know, the physical, the emotional, the mental, the moral, the social, and the spiritual. And I mean the spiritual from a standpoint of purpose and meaning.
Right.
And that I think some of our best teachers in our schools are in some ways really good health educators, because they bring out the best in their students. But formalized curriculum done well, okay, is really important. And sometimes it actually gets short shrifted, you know, along with our physical education programs, you know, and so it doesn't necessarily always bring out the best in young people. And so if we're really talking about looking at that whole person, we want to talk about that behavior. We want to talk about how young people think about their own health and what they need to do, because there's so many educators for health behavior out there that we see, whether it's through advertisements on TV and a variety of other things, that the school becomes a really fertile ground when accepted, and that schools promote good health behavior and good health education.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's been a long time since I was in high school, but I do remember you only had to take a year of phys ed. In middle school, they make you slog through it, and it's horrible, and like no one likes it except the kids who are super naturally physically fit, and you have to do all this. Like, I think we learned how to dance at one point. Like, it was, but when we talk about being stuck in the 1800s, and we talk about health, if we continue to use BMI, body mass index, as an indicator of health, and we continue to just hammer that into the heads of our young people, we are leading them towards unhealthy lives. Like, and that's the thing. I think they still use those little fat pension caliper things to decide whether or not you're healthy. Like, are you kidding me? So as long as we continue to perpetuate this terrible, terrible notion that you got to be super skinny and thin and have a BMI of whatever and blah, 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 we're doing a disservice to health, right? You see the chunky girl and you think, oh, no, she can't do any of that. No, she's going to kick your butt in the pool, because she's not fat, she's muscular, right? We talk about how there's super famous athletes who are at the top of their game and super fit, and you look at their BMI and it's obese or morbidly obese, because they're short and muscular, or because they're tall and just big bones and muscles and all this other stuff. So I think as living in the 1800s, if we continue to perpetuate the idea that size equals health, we're going to ruin another entire generation of young people. And really going out of our way to make sure that movement and sport are available to every single kid, no matter what, that'll be a huge step too. An absolutely huge step.
Oh, no doubt about that. As you were saying that, excuse me, I was thinking to myself that I don't know their BMI, but I imagine that Venus Williams and Serena Williams can have the greatest BMI in the world, because they are actually, and when I look at them, they look fairly, they're definitely athletic, but they're also what I guess some people would consider stocky.
Yes. We call them, some people call them thick or curvy or voluptuous, but I will tell you, a lot of what's under that is muscle. You go look at their quads and their calves. What? That's how they get that explosive energy for tennis. Those arms, pow! I mean, they're incredible. And they're a really, really great example, along with many other female sports people, that whatever you think the ideal body type is for an athlete, you're probably wrong, because we have women at the top of their game who've had children, who are pregnant, who are fatter than you think it should be, who are just killing it. They're just doing an amazing job. So
that's one of the things I was talking to John about before you joined and everything. And I would love to know your thoughts about the coach of the Arizona team that decided that she was going to both coach and breastfeed her child at the same time that she was doing all of this great coaching and everything. But I would love to hear your perception of that, because I do know that there were some people, and I love what the commentator said, one of the sports commentators, as they were given the details of what she was going through in order to prepare the milk for her child, was like, if you think that this is too much information, then we need to get past this and everything.
Right.
Basically what she said, but I couldn't have agreed with her more and all of that. But I would love to know your thoughts.
Here's what's so interesting. What have John and I been talking about? Athletes are more than just athletes. Coaches are more than just coaches. We have kids, we have families, we have jobs. Yeah, her job at that moment is to be a coach. And guess what? Her job at that moment is also to make sure her child gets enough food to develop properly. So what are you going to do? You're going to breastfeed when you need to. You're going to pump when you need to. Women don't have that choice. We can't just be like, hey, come back in 30 minutes. That's not how it works. And especially we talk about like the emotion thing that happens. You know, there's that whole thing that I don't know much about, but I have had friends who have kids, and they'll be talking about something that's very emotional and just it'll flow, because that's just how it is. There's and I cannot remember her name, and I hate that I can't remember it, an ultra distance runner who was doing like a 100-mile run or something like that, right? Who had to stop at least twice to pump for her child, because her kid was like 6 or 7 months old. She had to pump for them, because that has to come out, or it's like you're going to have issues. So she had planned that into her race to be able to do that, not only to be able to feed her child, because she was out running for I want to say 28 or 29 hours, but like her kid needed to eat at that time too. So normalize the idea that women have children, and that the way those children get raised is by feeding them. And for many women, choosing to breastfeed your child, that's your choice. So I do remember hearing a little bit about that, and I was like, yeah, people need to get over it if they can't deal with it. Do they think that they were once babies too, right? Their mamas took care of them too. So yeah, I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was an awesome thing that was going on in that particular situation. One of the things that you oftentimes hear people talk about with athletes is the fact that it is a very small minority that actually make it to the professional level. So a lot of times people will talk about the fact that, it's a lot of people that are doing it in high school, on the college level, but only a select few are going to make it into the professional level. And that maybe there's an over concentration on that part of sports and everything, because not everybody is going to be a LeBron James and be able to make that kind of money that LeBron makes, or that Seth Curry makes, or a number of other great athletes make in that regards. So what do you say to those that might think that we have over commercialized, and maybe even unrealistically over commercialized, the chances of folks have to be a professional athlete? Because like I said, we want the top athletes, and we definitely want folks to be there providing us that entertainment, whether it's the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, or a number of other leagues, even the Olympics and all. But that's a small fraternity that is, it's not as wide as we would like to think. And sometimes too often, too many people in our minority communities and in our like lower income communities, they see that and entertainment as their only way out, and don't necessarily concentrate on some of the other ways out as well. So when you're, as a coach, when you're seeing folks that have potential, but maybe they don't have the potential to be at the next level, what are some of the words of encouragement that you give them to continue pursuing their dream, but also look at other opportunities?
I think it's about looking at the process of everything. As you said, Mark, and Kyle would probably agree that certain people can be a professional Olympic triathlete. I mean, and then the same thing in team sports too. I'm currently working with some individuals who are potential Olympians, and they have they have a variety of different factors that are really going for them. Okay. But for that, I'm working, with a variety of different athletes who aren't going to get there. And getting them, it's important over time to be realistic. And one of the things that's really important, where at many times that some athletes and start kind of specializing in sports at younger and younger ages. And then, in some ways, after a while, and I was on a show with Dr. Andrew Jacobs yesterday out of Kansas City, Missouri. He's a sports psychologist, talking about the notion of that some kids are ready to retire from active sport at the age of 13 or 14. And many people have heard this before, but it's true. It's because they've had so many games and matches, and they're just getting tired of that there. And so the idea is that looking by and getting athletes to look at what is the purpose of why they do what they do, okay, and how can they enjoy the process, and at the same time, if they're looking for that brass ring, what is going on in the middle where they can be present in the moment to really enjoy moment by moment, practices, races, games, and stuff like that, so they can bring out the best in themselves, as kind of deferring all that, that good stuff until they kind of get to another level. And I think it's really important that we share that with athletes in there. We don't want to burst their bubble whatsoever. Okay. And that's important not to do. But we also have to look at where they are in areas that they've gone to. I work with a variety of hockey, ice hockey, male ice hockey players who've gone through the junior level, then through college. And there's a realization through that process whether they're going to go any further or not with that. It usually kind of shows up after a while. And there's a grief process that goes through that. There's a sense of loss. But as a coach, you are there for that athlete to help them through that process, to help them move forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. John gets it just absolutely right. Oh my gosh, train of thought. I always have my athletes set goals for their races, right? Sometimes their goal is just finish, which is fine. The majority of them, it's finish. A lot of them, it's finish before the cutoff. Some of them, I have two athletes specifically that were chasing podiums, right? One of the really nice things I think in triathlon is you can go to a bunch of different races and you can win in your age group. You can win in Athena, you can win in veteran, you can win in newbie. There's lots of different places where you can try and get on the podium. And that's sort of, for two of my athletes, that's what they were chasing. And that is a really different goal and path to that goal than just finishing. Because the biggest thing is you only race against yourself. It's you versus the course, right? When we talk about team sports, it's a little bit different, right? Especially when we get to sort of that professional level. But it's you versus the course. And if you race against anyone else, you're always going to lose. Now, if your goal is to become the national champion, okay, we're going to try our best. And we're going to have a big talk about what happens if that doesn't happen. And so it's a really different kind of training when someone wants to win. And the thing with professional triathletes, to make that next big step up, the same with like Olympic swimmers or professional cyclists, or like you want to win the Boston Marathon, those athletes start at a younger age. They're not going to hire a coach like me because I don't have those credentials yet. They're going to be with a coach who's already taken that path, right? So if they don't hit those marks, if they don't get first place at Boston, their coach is like, and here's what we're going to do with this, right? Here's how we're going to turn this around. Like, you're done with ice hockey in college. That's great. How are we going to turn all of this experience and time that you've spent doing all of this into something useful? And that's where a good coach is really going to help that kid's trajectory. The role of professional sports in this, yes, we throw tons of money at it, right? But how many kids see LeBron James, Michael Jordan from my generation, Gwen Jorgensen, who is the first U.S. woman to win gold in Olympic triathlon? So many people see those athletes, those professional athletes, and think, I'm just going to keep trying, because if they can do it and I see that they can do it and they look like me, I know I've got a shot. And they keep trying. The only thing that we can hope is that they run into a coach or an adult or a leader who, when they miss the mark, says, what are we going to do with this experience that you've had now, right? You didn't get recruited to go play on the Mighty Ducks. What are we going to do with your 4 years of college, your 4 years of high school, and your 4 years of Pee Wee hockey to get your life into a place where you're doing something that you love, right? That's really all that we can hope for, because money in professional sports and the glamorization of professional athletes, it's not going away. It's not.
I know. I'm just to go off with Kyler. What you're saying, Kyler, is so true. I work with a Division I college men's swimming and diving team, and their coach is all about hitting the sweet spot of, doing well competitively, but also at the same time building the life skills. And part of his job, he believes part of his job is that he gets ready. He's readying these athletes for when they get out of college, for their next steps in there. Going exactly, what you were saying in there. And I believe part of that is I think, hitting the sweet spot of trying to be in present moment in everything that you do out there. And that's so hard and so challenging to do. Is to allow yourself, if you're in a race, okay, or in a game or in a practice, to be really focusing, to be non-judgmental, to focus on what you need to do right now at the right moment for the right reason. And if you're able to do that, more so you enjoy that whole process, as opposed to thinking, well, what if, and what's going to happen next week, and what's going to happen there. And going back to the question that you had, Mark, about how with health education in schools, the idea of helping our kids to be more mindful overall, okay, is really, really important. It's tough there. And COVID has had maybe kids going to kind of feel like a squirrel that you're going around back and forth and stuff like that, as opposed to say, slow down. Okay, what do I need to do right now to enjoy the process? That's why I think just like apps like Headspace are so important and powerful to get people to actually slow the process down, really enjoy and smell the roses.
Yeah, Definitely have to smell those roses and everything. No doubt about that. One of the things that I know that I've got an uncle who's he's a multiple stroke survivor. So right now he's definitely dealing with a lot of health issues and everything. But he was an avid golfer. Doesn't do the golfing now because of his health issues. But when he was an avid golfer, he competed on those age circuits, and I know that that's one of the reasons that he stayed so active before. Getting caught up in these health issues that he has now was because he was able to compete, like you were saying, Kyla, at different levels. So like I said, he was competing with folks that were similar to his age and all of that. And I want to say Uncle Randy is in his 80s now, but I remember him competing definitely in his, I want to say as far as the 60s and 70s in some of those competitions and everything as a golfer. But, you know, they were age bracket divided, so he wasn't necessarily competing with like the 20-year-old golfer or something like that. So I think that was one of those examples. Golf is definitely one of those examples where they do it by age bracket, and you can definitely have different levels of competition, whether it's by age or whether it's by abilities, because I'm sure there are some kind of ways that they accommodate people of different abilities if they are handicapped in one form or another, and not just a golf handicap, but like a physical handicap as well. But definitely that's something that I know exists out there. So I agree with you on that. One of the other things that I know one of my relatives did was a cousin of mine, and I'd love to hear both of your thoughts about this, is that a lot of times, you know, we love being coaches, whether it's a coach of life or a coach of people and everything, but then you get to go up in the position and you get to be something bigger than a coach. So I remember he was a coach and an assistant coach on the high school level. And then at some point he had to become was appointed an athletic director for his high school. And I remember that became kind of an issue because, you know, coaches like to coach and they like to coach no matter what's going on. So I believe his principal had to tell him that, you know, he did not get the right to coach his coach and all of that. You know, he needed to let the coach do the coaching, and he would need to handle the administrative side of things because that's what an athletic director does. But he was definitely there for a minute, particularly in sports that he enjoyed, like football. I think there for a minute he was tempted to be the coach in the stands. That's right, because the athletic director is probably in the stands versus on the field. So he was tempted to be the coach on the up there in the stands versus the actual coach. So when you have coaches that then go into other positions, maybe they go to the front office, or maybe they go and do something else within the administration, whether that's a professional level or on an individual level, what is some of the advice that you give them to let them understand that they have a new role and therefore they don't need to be trying to do their old role with the person that they hired for that role?
I think somebody once told me that being an athletic director is like setting a dinner party every day for 35 different coaches. And it's like setting the table, getting everything else ready for that. And that by being a great coach doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a great athletic administrator. Right. And I think what's really important is that the athletic director or program director has the capacity to be able to coach coaches, to be able to hold the line there too. And I think it's critical that with athletic programs, that core values are set and the mission is set within the organization as a whole, you know, so that the basically now the athletic director becomes that top that I was talking about.
Right.
But they're a bottom to somebody else, the school board or the principal or head of school or whatever. And that they're able to communicate to bring out the best in their coaches, but also the importance of holding the line right there. And the thing is also to cultivate the connections, to effectively challenge coaches by providing them the appropriate feedback. And third is that, as I've said before, as coaches can do this with athletes, ADs can do this with their coaches, of be autonomy supportive, letting go of control and allowing the coaches to coach, but to do so in a way that the coach's work is done in the spirit of the school values in the program's mission. That's really, really important there.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting because it brings to mind the adage, just because you're really good at math doesn't mean you should be a math teacher, right? So being an athletic director, you might be the greatest coach in the world, but if you can't stay organized, you're not going to be a great athletic director. So if you like being a coach and that's what you're really good at, be a coach, stay a coach. I really love being a coach. And almost everything I do is to make me a better coach. I became a referee, so I better understand the rules, how races are run, so I could make lots of connections in the racing world, so I get to go into professional races and meet my heroes, but to be a better coach. And in part of being a referee, they're like, oh, well, we need people to help teach rules to the new officials. Hi, I'd like to do that because I really like teaching and coaching. And I really want to make sure that people have a good experience. Now, do I want to write the rules? No. Do I want to be the person who is the head of all the other referees at a race? No, because I do not want to deal with that administration. I just want to be the person writing penalties. I just want to be a really good coach. At some point, my team will be big enough that I will have a swim specialist, a bike specialist, a run specialist. But I will still be the coach, even though I'll also be sort of a little bit of an administrator. I will still be the coach to my athletes. And I do not desire to be anything else because I'm really good at coaching and I really love it. So if someone asks you to be the athletic director and you're not good at it, this is my advice. Don't take the job. Like if you're going to be the head coach of a bunch of other coaches, like John was saying, and you're going to coach other coaches, yeah, go for that, especially if like that's what you really want. But if someone asks you to do something, just because you're really good at math doesn't mean you should be a math teacher. Yeah, that's my advice.
Now that makes a lot of sense and everything. I have to ask you because I know that in team sports, the referee is definitely the one that gets a lot of abuse and a lot of neglect and all of that. Is it the same case in individual sports like the triathlete? So does the referee get as much abuse as the referee gets in, say, a baseball game or in a basketball game?
Oh my gosh, it's such a great question. So as part of USA Triathlon, which is like the governing body of all the triathlon stuff and the person who sends out all the referees and things like that, we very much are there to educate athletes, right? We walk around transition at the beginning of the race. We answer questions. If we spot something that might be a problem later, we might tell an athlete, hey, just so you know, X, Y, Z, right? Once we're out on the race course, that's when we're referees. And here's what's really, really great about being a referee. It's anonymous. If you're riding on the back of a motorcycle, writing up bike penalties, you've got a helmet, pants, a shirt, a jet. They don't know who you are. So when you write up all the penalties, the head official is the one who posts them. And if an athlete has a problem with that, they go to the head official. That's why I don't want to be a head official. I just want to be a regular official. So it's fantastic because at Challenge Daytona, someone gave Alistair Brownlee, Olympic medal winning Alistair Brownlee, someone gave him a bike penalty. And he had a really rough run and he ended up just sort of dropping out of the race, realized it really wasn't worth it. Like, because he got the penalty, I don't know. No one will tell me, no one will tell me who wrote that penalty. No one knows the referee that wrote that penalty, right? So there's a lot of anonymity that comes with that, a lot of protection. We are really trying to be the friendly face of the rules, right? That's really where we're trying to be as an officials thing. Do people get angry? Absolutely, especially if they think we made the wrong call or we're being jerks or we're getting in the way or whatever. Yeah, people get angry, but it's not like at a baseball game or a football game where they're just like, they're just treating them terribly. And man, do I hate that. Not just even before I was a ref. I was like, come on, they're just doing their job. But yeah, no, we don't get a lot of tomatoes thrown at us. So.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah. I was actually, John, I was picturing somebody just handing LeBron James a note saying that he had a penalty as opposed to like actually having the physical call. So I was picturing like, just like a note handed off to LeBron James or to Paul Pierce or somebody saying, I'm sorry, that was the charge.
Just like a little note. Excuse me, Mr. James. Yeah, you have a 2-minute penalty. With no idea who it was from. Oh, that's hilarious.
I think that might be a little, yes, might have to change the rules and everything. One of the things that I was curious about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, John, is, and it comes back to team sports, is definitely within team sports, I'm a big fan of minor league baseball, probably because the Durham Bulls are here and all of that. And of course, those folks are going through the process of getting to the shelf. They're going through the process of making it to the big time and all of that. But a lot of the other sports don't necessarily have that as much as they could have it the way that baseball does. Because baseball, you got everything from the different A's all the way up till you make it to the majors and everything. I think that to some degree, kind of these D leagues and stuff like that have become that for the NBA, but I don't know necessarily, even though there have been attempts to do it, that we've really had a true minor league for the NFL and for some of the other sports. So what is your thoughts? Do you think that we do a good enough job of developing even our minor league programs, both in baseball and in basketball? And do you think there's room to develop minor league programming in football and some of the other sports that are out there, maybe even your beloved lacrosse?
Well, I think in many ways the minor leagues to professional football is the college game.
Right.
You know, it really helps athletes to get there. And I think once that athlete, if that athlete can make that transition over there, then what are the responsibilities of the NFL for that athlete too? As you know, even though they're getting paid money to do this, what is the responsibility for the league to do that? I mean, I think the same thing like with lacrosse, the minor leagues are the college game, you know, that kind of gets you, you know, to get to that point before you go to the professional level in there, you know. And then as you're talking about the D leagues and stuff like that, where that's a chance where athletes can, you know, basketball players can get noticed. And I think that's important too. But I'm biased to where, what can the athlete do for the pro league, but what can the pro league do for the athlete to bring out the best in them as a human being? Even though
Yeah, because that actually raises a question that I know a lot of people are thinking about even to this day, which is maybe at some point we need to figure out a way to actually officially, even though they might be unofficially getting compensated, compensate those college athletes if they're going to be going into the pros anyway, or at least some of them are. Maybe, like we said, not a large percentage, but I do wonder your thoughts about that, because I know there's been a push to try to have athletes, particularly college athletes, be allowed to get some sort of compensation, because in a lot of ways, it is their training ground.
That's a really good question, and I'm still working on the answer for that. I'm going to be very judicious about this. I just know, one thing: if an athlete is on a full athletic scholarship, they're
being compensated.
Their 4 years of eligibility is being paid for by the college. I mean, and what does that do? And then the other question. So I think I'm answering this by asking more questions. The second piece is, if an athlete is, compensated, what does that do to the athlete in their team connection in there? As does the athlete, is the athlete promoting him or herself, or is being promoted by an agent for him or herself? And at the same time, what does that do for the overall team concept that we see at the college level? And I think those are questions the NCAA is looking at right now to look to see those things. So I'm going to opt out a little bit on that, because I'm just not sure. I think I'm not sure if there's a sweet spot and how that might be hit with those areas.
No, and I think that they're definitely looking at it. And even coming back to Cal and the triathletes and everything, I know that that's also been an issue within quote unquote amateur sports like the Olympics, where a number of folks are trying to figure out how they can balance whatever pay that they are getting with the fact that they are quote unquote amateur athletes. So it does seem like there is a fine line between the quote unquote amateur athlete and the professional athlete. And I'm sure that you've run across that with the triathletes, because I know that definitely that's come up in bicycling, which is one of the triathlete sports, but I'm thinking more of like the professional bicycling and the
Oh
Olympic
yeah.
bicycling, and definitely we've seen it in other sports that are Olympic sports as well, even track and field.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's a very the whole idea of paying paying athletes, right? Athletes making money off of being athletes. Um, it's just so different across the whole spectrum, right? And you look at some sports that aren't as popular where the way people get paid is they get sponsorships. So their bike, their helmet, their shoes, their food, their gear, their whatever gets paid for by that company, and they rep that company, right? So it's it's a very interesting thing, and I'm going to be very interested to see how it plays out, as John was saying, in the NCAA. Because you have kids who are on a full scholarship, so they're getting compensation, right? But you also have athletes that aren't on a full scholarship that are, so it's all very interesting, and seeing how it's all going to play out. I think what happens with the NCAA will trickle down or spread out to the other sports as well, as far as how we deal with amateurs and things like that. So I think that that's really an indicator of what may happen. And that's a really clever way of saying what John said, which is not really having an answer because we don't really know what's going to happen.
Yep. Definitely wanted to say, by the way, Tim Sohn, who's one of the friends of the show, he was popping in and saying hello to all of us, but he is a longtime fan and a longtime watcher, but he's actually in Pennsylvania. So he's actually oftentimes watching and making comments from the Pennsylvania area. I know we're going to wind down and everything, but I definitely wanted folks to have an opportunity to learn more about your individual efforts that y'all are involved in. And there's a question I ask everybody pretty much toward the end of all of my interviews. That's a very basic question and everything, but any of the social media that folks can reach out to you, and any of the things that you would like to share with our audience in general, now is the time to do that. And then I'll get to that one overall question that I ask all my guests, no matter what field they're in.
Well, I'm just, Marc, really excited to be on your show this week, and also a treat to meet you, Kyla. This has been wonderful.
Same.
We're, the three of us kind of going back and forth with this. I'm really excited because this week I launched my book, The Coaching Zone: Next Level Leadership in Sports, and it's on Amazon right now, and on Thursday is our actual launch day, so you can get the book at a highly reduced rate for that day on Kindle. So I'm doing shameless promotion here, but
Nice.
The book really addresses some of the things that I've talked about today. And basically looking at the role of coaches in there. And I think what differentiates the book differentiated from other coaching books is it goes past the X's and O's and really looks at the coaching. What is it to be a coach? The purpose, the shortcomings, the strengths, and stories that coaches have there too. So you can reach me at john@jaegerleadership.com. That's one word in there. And also the book's website, which is www.thecoachingzonebook.com. So those are several different ways, and love to chat with you and to support anybody else, anybody out there who's in coaching, and to just really a lot of gratitude for having an opportunity to share some of my thoughts and listening to both of you on today's show. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem at all. Definitely enjoyed having you on. What is just really quickly, what are some of the things that within that book that we have not talked about that shocks you? Because I know whenever I talk to authors, there's sometimes some things that they find out as they're writing these books that they were not expecting. There's always that hidden nugget. So what would you say is a hidden nugget that folks can look for in the book that shocked you even as you were doing the book?
I think the stories, I interviewed around 50 different sports psychologists and coaches out there, and to find the similarities among their stories, their narratives of really what got them to that point. And it really helped to kind of seal the deal of really looking at the important non-negotiables for coaches to be really effective with their athletes.
Yeah, definitely. And what do you think some of those non-negotiables are, really quickly, for the coach to have that you found to be like a common non-negotiable?
One is that they have to cultivate the connections, through trust, empathy, and mattering. They need to challenge athletes by giving appropriate feedback. And they also need to let go of control to a certain degree. And that differs between youth and professional. But to know what that sweet spot is really, really important.
Now, I can definitely agree with that. Before I get to Kyla, and I definitely want to hear what Kyla's got going on, what kind of things she's got going on in her life, and things that she's got going with the whole things that are going on in her world. But I was going to share a story with y'all that y'all will both get a kick out of, which is that my nephew, I told you I have 2 nephews, but this was probably 5 or 6 years ago, and they were involved in competitive soccer. So they were involved in competitive soccer, and they were in the middle of a competition. And I can't remember, was it the oldest one, Julius, or Langston, the younger one, but they were just having a good old time, and they were just going, all involved, all engaged in the game and everything. And then toward the end of the game, I think they were up 2-1. They just went into this total temper tantrum, and everybody was looking at me, looking at my parents, their grandparents, looking at my brother, and trying to figure out why are they having a temper tantrum. And they came back to us, and they were like, I don't want the game to stop. I want to keep on playing. So that's why they were having a temper tantrum, because they wanted the game to go on for hours and hours and hours, and they were just upset because they had to stop playing this soccer game that they were in the middle of, and therefore they went into a temper tantrum. Like I said, they are now at the age of 11 and 12, about to be 12 and 13, and I think this was like maybe when they were around 8 or 9, so it was a few years back and everything. But that story just resonates with me, because so often we don't think about how much the kids and even the adults love being involved in these games of life. And it can be just something simple as a pickup game, because I know folks that are adults that get upset when the pickup game of basketball is done, or the pickup game of football, or whatever other pickup games they might be playing as well. But Kyla, what are some of the things that you got on your plate?
So first, John, thank you. Like, I love it when I get to meet new people and learn new things. And it was just such a joy to meet you. Mark, thank you so much for bringing the 2 of us here together. Like, again, great, excellent choice, I think. So I'm a coach, and I have a team. We're called Team Go Big, and you can find us at teamgobig.life. Not .com, .life, teamgobig.life. We are committed to a radical level of body inclusivity in sport and in the world. So it doesn't matter your gender, your race, your body size, your whatever, what kind of bike you have, the shoes you wear, whatever. You are welcome on our team. You can go to teamgobig.life, learn more about the team. There's a little thing, you can click on it, get on my calendar. We can chat about whatever challenge it is that you want to go after. Doesn't have to be triathlon. And what was the other thing I was going to say? I'm on Instagram. That's where I am, where I'm authentic and awesome and whatever. So that's, Instagram.com, whatever. And it's Go Big. This is where it gets the thing. Embodiment. So IN body, BODYMENT, ment. Embodiment. It's the kind of life coaching or body image coaching that I do along with triathlon. We are really looking forward to an amazing, amazing race season this year, traveling all over the place. The biggest, most exciting thing is we have our very first West Coast race in Southern California in July, and we are just tickled about it. And on a personal athlete level, I am racing my heart out this year to qualify to go to the World Championships in Australia in 2022. I went in 2019 to Spain and just missed the mark, missed the time cutoff for the bike and for the last loop of the bike. And so I'm going back to try and do it again. And I hired a coach. I hired 2 coaches. So I'm sure John will agree with me. Great coaches get coached. And so it sounds like John is a really great coach if you're a coach and you need coaching. And if you're an athlete and you need coaching, come find me at Team Go Big.
Sounds great and everything. One of the things that I really enjoyed while watching the NCAA basketball this weekend, and like I said, I'm going to try to watch the championship game later on tonight and everything, was seeing people that were not necessarily what we would consider the norm and everything in the sense of athletic size and all of that. Because one of the guards, I believe it was the guard for UCLA, is not your standard size of the big guards these days. They were actually relatively short and all of that comparatively to the rest of them. But they went in there with the timber all game long. And even though that particular team lost, I think that I can't remember. I think they're coming back next year. I'm not sure if they were a senior or not, but it does seem to me that if I remember correctly, they might be coming back next year. But whether they are or not, they've definitely had the experience and definitely seemed to not mind going in there with the trees. And then we saw a lot of women that were actually as tall as myself that were playing in the women's game, and some that were even taller than me. I think there was one that they gave her height as like 6'2" or something like that. So definitely we've seen a lot of folks that are not necessarily falling within the traditional sizes that people may be thinking about. So it's good that you're doing that kind of work to fight against those stereotypes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The question that I always ask all the guests at the end, and that's what I was going to ask, is that throughout the interview, we talk about a lot of different issues, a lot of different things, but I always give people a chance to give their word of positivity, their word of encouragement that they would like to give to our global community, because the International Broadcast Media is a podcast network that Nick Palveda and Kim Calhoun founded, and it's got programmers from around the country. I know we've got a music program out of South Africa. We've got a kind of spirituality program out of Nigeria. We've got guests and folks that come from as far away as New Zealand to other parts of the United States to England, to just being a true global community. So any words of encouragement that you would like to share with the audience in general? And I'll start off with you, Kyla, and then go to John. But any words of positivity or encouragement that you would like to give to our global community?
You're giving John the advantage. All right. So here's what I always tell all my athletes. You are already ready. You don't need to wait another moment to get started on whatever it is that your heart is calling you to do. You are already ready. Don't wait anymore. Go for it.
Sounds great. What about you, John? Any words of encouragement or positivity that you would like to share?
I go back to the ancient rock group Journey and don't stop believing. And that has a double negative in there. So I look at the idea as belief. Belief.
Nice. Love it.
Definitely. Great idea. Great thoughts. I want to thank both of you for being guests. As I oftentimes tell many of my guests, do know that you may be reached out to again on Potted or some of the other platforms, because you were both amazing guests. And I look forward to having you come back and share your journeys in the near future and could make a return trip. So don't think that it was just a one-time, one-off visit at the radio show with Mark Lee. I'm hoping that you'll appear either on this show or on some of the other shows that I am doing for International Broadcast Media. So I want to thank both of you for being tremendous guests and look forward to seeing you again in the very near future.
You got it. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
No problem. So we're going to ready to bring a couple of the spots of upcoming shows that also exist here on this platform, including Chess Stars, because we've got a lot of folks that are all about chess here and everything. So Sasha is actually in Canada, so we're going to let you check a little bit about Chess Stars, as well as Talking Upstream, which is a show that we have where people are creating entire movies and a TV series, and they're doing that on Sundays. But Chess Stars is actually doing the course of the week. So let's see what Sasha's got to say about his show.